I wanted to tell you a couple little things. One, I wanted to welcome everyone to the ceremony tonight. Second, I wanted to mention to you that this facility, and I think some of you have heard me say this before, you are in the only museum for the sport of polo in the world. And it's a great feat that we have that here in North America. We are largely here to preserve the history and traditions of the sport and to honor the players and athletes and people who support the sport over the year. If you are numbers counter, this is our 41st year as a museum. I don't know if anybody knew that. This is the 30th consecutive year of an induction ceremony, and for those of you who haven't been keeping track, there are 94 members in the Hall of Fame, there are 39 horses to remember, and there are 31 Eigelhart honorees, in addition to an enormous amount of artifacts and artwork that celebrate our sport that are put up in the museum and change from year to year. And the goal of our board is to try and make sure that the history and traditions are not only preserved, but they're here to be enjoyed and interpreted as well. One of the other things I wanted to mention, all of this happens because we have a phenomenal board of directors who works very hard, and it's an all-volunteer army, to make sure that there is a museum and that the museum can do all the things that we do. So one, for all the board members that are here, I'd ask you to stand up and take a thank you from the crowd for all the work that you do to make sure that this museum happens. Next, we have the tiniest, hardest working crew in the history of any museum, George and Brenda DuPont, and they work tirelessly to make sure this event happens. George and Brenda. And if my slides will advance, maybe not. The other thing I wanted to mention, you are sitting with and among some of the greatest players and horsemen in the history of polo in North America. A lot of our prior honorees are here in the room tonight, and I'm going to mention their name and ask them to stand up, and I'd like to give them a round of applause and recognition as well. Mariano Aguirre. Tony Capola. Ruben Gracida. Glenn Holden. Fred Mannix. Lev Miller. Jimmy Newman. And I'm going to take a second. I want to recognize Steve Orthwine, who's not here, everyone knows. Ginny is here in his place, and he passed away this last year, but it seems appropriate to recognize him because we didn't get a chance to last year. So for Steve, Ginny. Gonzalo Perez. Is Gonzalo Perez? Bill Sinclair. Where's Bill? Charles Smith. Paul Van Gontard. Over here. So tonight, I want to celebrate and offer congratulations, one for all of our new honorees and also for our honorees from the past, as we honor the inductees, both people and horses, for all of the things that they've contributed to the sport. And last, I want to thank all of our sponsors. Maybe that slide will come up, maybe it won't. There's an enormous list, and without our sponsors, from the individuals for the dinner, Mark and Melissa Ganzi, Grand Champions Polo Club and Digital Bridge. For wine and spirits, Lippman Brothers, Robert Lippman and Margaret Lippman Orthwine, Brown Foreman, Bacardi, Tito's Handmade Old Hickory Bourbon. It's hard to read that. Like 29 Wine, Corbel Champagne. For the entertainment, Wayne and Pamela Garrison. for the polo art that's contributed to the museum, especially Melinda Brewer, who does an enormous amount for us for the Horses to Remember, and a thing I will mention to you later. And the exhibit photography, Alex Pacheco, our press and social media, which includes Frederick Roy, Crystal, and Zach Whitman. I'm sorry, I can't see it that way. And then for all the traveling exhibit work that give the Gansey family and the Potamkin family, who does an enormous amount for the museum. So we're going to take a pause. We want you to all have a great dinner. We're going to start the program in about 45 minutes, and we've got a lot to cover tonight, so enjoy, have a good time at your tables, and we will talk to you a little later. Thank you. The very first thing I want to do tonight is honor the Horses to Remember. We're going to begin tonight by honoring our noble equine partners, because without them, we don't have a sport. The Horses to Remember Award is presented to recognize outstanding polo ponies whose achievements on the field are singled out as worthy of special recognition. The first horse we're going to honor tonight is Conover. Conover was part of the enviable string of ponies selected by Harry Payne Whitney, captain of the legendary group of American players known as the Big Four, all of whom are in the Hall of Fame. Their horses were given enormous credit for helping the Americans to establish their rise to dominance in international polo at the turn of the 20th century. Conover played a big part in that success story. Although owned and played by Whitney, Conover was also loaned to Whitney's teammate Monty Waterbury, who favored and relied heavily upon the game old pony when the going was crucial. Waterbury is most often pictured in team photos mounted on Conover. Even as the aged horse played with tremendous heart and courage in the game old Texas-bred gelding represented America well throughout the hard-fought matches of 1909, 1911, 1913, and 1914. He will be forever remembered as a gallant star of the international matches that marked a turning point for polo in this country. To accept the award for Conover tonight, Lev Miller.
Thank you.
Linda, congratulations.
Thank you so much. I gotta say, after this being the 30th anniversary, I can't believe it. But it is so great to see everybody here and to see that this museum is thriving and beautiful. What a great honor to represent my grandfather's pony Conover at this induction ceremony. Although he was even before my time in polo, it is likely that my mother knew Conover well, as she learned to play polo and was a part of the girls' team in the early 20s. Thanks to Brenda for her research, this is some of the history she found. Conover was a Texas-bred bay gelding foaled sometime between 1892 and 1895, if the stories reporting his age are correct. Although written accounts differed slightly from year to year, it is still clear that he played remarkably as an aged pony. Conover was said to be second to none, except perhaps, my grandfather's legendary pony, Cottontail, who's in the Hall of Fame also. Horses to be remembered in 2008, he was inducted. Conover was lauded for his great speed, brilliant performances over a number of years of grueling international matches, both here and overseas, spanning the years from 1909 to 1914. He was written about often. It was said that he had brought fame to the Texas cow pony and was described as a hero and one of the best of the Whitney string. He proved himself to be a mount with an indomitable spirit, a gallant game warhorse for two Hall of Famers, my grandfather Harry Payne Whitney and his Hall of Fame teammate Monty Waterbury. While my grandfather used Cottontail as his mainstay, Monty chose Conover as his. And together, they all made history as part of one of the hardest riding and most competitive polo teams of the era, the Big Four. After a long and illustrious career, Conover was retired and relied upon as a trusty mount for the Whitney children to learn to ride. And one of those Whitney children was my mother. In the Small World apartment, it is worth noting that 46 years ago, when I met my future wife, Linda, I had no idea that Monty Waterbury's brother, Larry, who played Conover, was her great uncle. Well, I asked her to come up here also, because it seems fitting. It seems I owe Conover a great deal. Many thanks on behalf of my family to this great museum and Hall of Fame, and to the committee, and Marty, George, and Brenda. Thank you so much.
Lev and Linda, thank you very much. And Lev, thanks for the vision that made this whole museum come together. The next horse we're going to honor tonight is Mr. Polo. Memo Gracita's memorable warhorse, Mr. Polo, more than lived up to his name. Playing in his first U.S. Open at age 4, the magnificent chestnut thoroughbred gelding played with a heart for Memo through over 10 years of high-goal polo. Together they won 8 U.S. Opens, with Mr. Polo always playing 2 chukkers. He earned many best-playing ponies in other tournaments along the way, including the Camacho Cup, and was featured in Sports Illustrated magazine. Mr. Polo was a perfect example of the extraordinary talent that can be found in thoroughbred horses brought from the racetrack and repurposed for polo. He was purchased by Memo the day after winning a race at Sunland Park and went on to polo greatness. Mr. Polo died just a few years ago at the age of 38 and will be forever remembered as one of the great equine athletes in the sport of polo. Accepting the award for Mr. Polo tonight is Mimi Gracita Boyle.
Good evening. It's wonderful being with you all. It's like a big family, honestly. Can you hear me? Memo's in California, and he asked me to read his acceptance speech for Mr. Polo. I wanted to start by thanking the United States Polo Hall of Fame Committee for choosing to induct Mr. Polo into the Hall of Fame. I'm sorry I'm not there to accept the award, but I wanted to have a little note read in honor of this champion pony. The first time I saw Mr. Polo was in 1980 at Sunland Park in El Paso, Texas. Mimi and I were on our way to Santa Barbara for the Pacific Coast Open and stopped to visit my Uncle Chino, who told me that he had a racehorse for polo. Although Mr. Polo was winning many races, Uncle Chino was a polo fanatic, and he felt Mr. Polo's true calling was to be a polo pony. He couldn't have been more correct. When I laid eyes on Mr. Polo, I immediately felt as though I was in front of a special horse. He had the presence, the eye, and the temperament of a champion. For those of you who know horses, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The beautiful chestnut's registered name was Cacahuate, which means peanut. However, I purchased the horse from Chino under the condition that I would call him Mr. Polo. I agreed reluctantly because I knew naming a 3-year-old horse Mr. Polo was big shoes to fill. That day, we loaded Mr. Polo and shipped him to California. It was in Santa Barbara that Mimi gave Mr. Polo his first rides and introduction to the game. She would help school and stick and ball him while I was more focused on the playing horses. It was certainly her time in the saddle with Mr. Polo that gave him the proper foundation into the game of polo and helped start his tremendous career. Many people have asked me how Mr. Polo got his name. As I mentioned, Cacahuate was Mr. Polo's registered name, but my dear friend and teammate and groom, Chuy Baez, started calling him Mr. Cacahuate as a joke per my Uncle Chino's request. So his name went from Cacahuate to Mr. Cacahuate. But when the horse started to perform at Palm Beach Polo and Country Club and players started to notice him, Mr. Cacahuate started to earn a new name. The Argentine players started asking who was the good-looking chestnut gelding that I was playing. One of the Mexican grooms working for me told them that the horse was Mr. Polo, so everyone in polo world started calling him Mr. Polo. I can say that this horse earned his name on his own with his extraordinary ability. The abilities led him to have an unforgettable career, which is why he's being inducted this evening. Mr. Polo played his first U.S. Open in 1981 as a 4-year-old. A year later, he became my best horse, and he helped me achieve my 10-goal handicap. I played him 2 checkers in the 1982 Open, and he continued to play in 1983, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 1990. He helped me win 7 U.S. Opens, and I played him 2 checkers in almost each game. Today, horses are get recognized for playing 1 minute and 30 seconds in an Open, but Mr. Polo would have just been warming up in 1 minute and 30 seconds into a checker. As with all top athletes, Mr. Polo suffered some injuries. In '85, he was playing the $100,000 Royal Palm Gold Cup in Boca for the Retama Polo team. Mr. Polo received a blow to his right tendon by Juan Badiola's horse in a bump. Manuel Romero, known by everyone as Ñor, was his groom and caretaker. Although this injury would have been cut short most horses' careers, with the heart of Mr. Polo and Manuel's incredible ability to heal, he overcame this injury and continued his domination of the sport. So thank you very much to Manuel Romero, who groomed him for his entire polo career. In 1987, Mr. Polo's leg blew up at the end of the Florida season, and I rested the horse for 6 months. Manuel insisted and convinced me to take him to Palm Springs, California for the U.S. Open. We legged him up gently and plenty of slow work and time. On the day of the final, the leg looked cold and tight, and Dr. Mike Gerard gave us the okay after ultrasounding the tendon. Mr. Polo played with no practice in over 6 months. Thanks to Mr. Polo and Kaliman, another Hall of Fame horse, the Aloha Polo team won one of the most incredible and difficult games ever against Los Potros. I scored 9 goals that match thanks to these 2 unbelievable horses. In 1991, we made the decision to retire Mr. Polo. However, he jumped, no pun intended, into a new career with my beautiful daughter, Michelle. Michi and Mr. Polo entered the show jumping ring, winning many ribbons together. Brought great joy to see this champion pony carrying Michi over the fences. After his brief show jumping career, Mr. Polo retired to the rolling mountains in North Carolina at Mimi's Chester Bar Farm. Mr. Polo lived there until 2015 when he was 38 years old, and I would like to thank Roger Maines and his family for taking such good care of him. When Mr. Polo was 35, we decided to take DNA samples from him in case we wanted to clone him one day. And I'm happy to say that Mr. Polo's cells are in Argentina at Doña Sofia, and he is awaiting his turn to be cloned as we speak. There have been, great. There have been many extraordinary horses that I've had the privilege to ride and play in my career, and I'm grateful to each of those animals because each one taught me something different. However, Mr. Polo is a horse that sticks out more than others because, quite honestly, he reminded me of myself, and he exuded the characteristics that helped create the career I've had. Neither of us were naturals, but our heart, our dedication, our hard work, and our desire made us champions. And perhaps it's because of these characteristics that made Mr. Polo and me such a successful team and what made Mr. Polo an unforgettable horse. I'm forever grateful to him for all that he contributed to my life and to my family's life. Thank you, Mr. Polo. May you never be forgotten.
The next award we want to give out tonight is the Philip Eigelhart Award. The Philip Eigelhart Award was begun in 2001, and is given to acknowledge exceptional lifetime contributions to the sport of polo. We give out one posthumous award and one living award every year. This year, the posthumous award goes to John Armstrong. A second-generation polo enthusiast, John Armstrong played and won his first tournament in 1937, starting a career that spanned 65 years, during which he attained a 6-goal handicap. By his true contribution to polo was his influence and the example of sportsmanship and good character he set for generations of players both on and off the field. He guided them with tips on horsemanship, team play, and general good advice. He was a respected resource and stabilizing influence wherever he was involved. Armstrong helped organize polo across South Texas and was passionate about holding special polo events to benefit others. Examples are a match with Prince Charles on the Armstrong Ranch, a special match to honor Cecil Smith in Breckenridge Park, and an international match between the United States and Spain at Retama. He took teams to England, Pakistan, and Guatemala. He was, in a manner, a lifelong ambassador for polo. Accepting the award for John Armstrong will be his son, Stuart, tonight.
On behalf of all the Armstrongs that are here tonight, Charlie, Julia, my wife Cece, Stosh, Larkin, Mia, Coble, and Henrietta, I want to thank the board of the Hall of Fame for including Papa in this illustrious group for induction. But I need to also specifically speak and thank Jimmy Newman, because it was last spring that Jimmy Newman, in his inimitable style, announced to me that he said, "I want to nominate your father for the Hall of Fame, and I want you to help me." And I said, okay. And my first thought was, well, that is a magnanimous gesture on the part of someone who was close to Papa and had a special relationship with him. And I thought, I wasn't quite sure how this was going to go. So we filled out the nominations, and I have to say that when I got the letter from the board, the Hall of Fame, saying that he was going to be inducted, the first emotion I had was humility. I felt so humbled by the fact that Papa had been chosen when, I can tell you, he spent most of his free time contributing to the cattle industry. He's been recognized numerous times. He's been in a couple Hall of Fames in regard to his contribution to the cattle industry. He told me one time, I wish I'd contributed more to the USPA. I could have done more there. So when I got that letter, I realized that there were a lot more people that felt that way about Papa, and it wasn't just Jimmy. And that was humbling, because I think any son wants to live up to their father's expectations, and to know that that many people cared about his personal contribution. He made contributions, as Marty suggested, but he made a lot of one-on-one contributions, and I think Jimmy's sense was that's what he felt. So if Papa were here tonight, if he could speak for himself, he would emphasize first and foremost how important the relationships he built in polo were to him, both socially and in his business career. And he'd probably tell you a story or two very quickly. But then, to keep from boring you, he would set that aside, he'd pick up his guitar, and he'd play the Strawberry Roan. And he would do that to give you something to remember him by, and he'd play the hell out of it. I've seen him do it. He did it once in Lubbock when he got a very special award, and it was a tearjerker. Now, and he could also sing in Spanish. When the Cup of the Americas was held at Retama, the Coronel Suarez team came to San Antonio, and they had a little free time here and there, and they all wanted to come down to the ranch to get a tour. They were all interested in ranching and farming. So Papa organized a day trip for them. They came down. He gave them a tour. They toured all over around Kingsville. It's about two and a half hours south of San Antonio. And after they were through with the tour, he'd answered every question they could think of. Very conversant on anything to do with the cattle business, agriculture. I mean, that was his career. And he brought them back, fed them a nice lunch, and then after lunch, he serenaded them in Spanish for 30 minutes. And at one point, I remember Juan Carlitos looked over at me and without saying a word, he just gave me this look like, you know, your dad's a hell of a guy. And it wasn't too many years later, Juan Carlitos retired from the high goal polo in Argentina, and Papa decided that he wanted to play over here in Wellington in the high goal, so he talked to Charlie and I, and he said, I'd like to invite Juan Carlitos to come play with us. So he invited Juan Carlitos, and Juan Carlitos came, and it was a great experience for me, both on and off the field. And I can tell you unequivocally that he came for one reason. He came because he respected Papa. That was the only reason, and he was great to play with. And I think that says a lot about Juan Carlitos too, because he came a long way for someone he cared about. Now, that was one side of my dad's personality, but he had another side. And for those of you that knew him well, I think this will remind you of how he was, and for those of you that didn't know him, it'll give you a feel for how he operated. I think I must have been about 13 years old, and we loaded up the horses in Kingsville to drive up to San Antonio to play a match game in Breckenridge Park. And Breckenridge Park had boards, it had turf grass, the field was fast, and there were good players. Charles Smith played, Cecil and Mary are always there critiquing him and the horses. Ray Harrington played, Bobby Beveridge played, and on occasion Little Roy would be there tuning up his horses. But in any event, for a 13-year-old, it was the big league, and it was very exciting. So we started this game, and I think it was in the second chukker, and I fell off my horse. And I'm laying there on the ground trying to gather myself up and trying to figure out exactly how I'm supposed to react to this situation. And Papa comes over, steps down off his horse, he leans over, and he says, where are you hurting? And I showed him, I said, you know, I can't move my left shoulder. I'd landed on my left shoulder, and I couldn't move my arm. So he straightens up, and he starts unbuckling his belt. And then he stands me up, and he loops the belt over me, and he ties it around my waist and ties my elbow into my side and snubs it up good and tight. And he says, now let's get you back up on that horse. So in those days, I didn't weigh more than 100 pounds, and he gets me up on the horse, and he says, now you're going to be okay. You just steer that horse just like this, and you'll be just fine. And then he gives me a big smile, not a big smile, but kind of a little smile, just a warm smile, and he says, now let's go. So I can't tell you one thing about that game. I mean, that was 50 years ago. I can't tell you who played, I can't tell you who won, I can't tell you any play I made, I can't tell you anything about the game. But I can remember those few moments like it was last year. And, you know, I guess I thought about it over and over through the years, and I've come to realize that I learned a couple of things from those few minutes. And the first thing I learned was that if you have a situation like that, unless you're incapacitated, you need to figure out how to get yourself pulled together and back on that horse and not waste everybody's time. And the second thing I learned, which I took to heart, is that there's no crying in polo. You don't need to get dramatic about it. Just get on with it. So those are the two lessons I learned specifically. But I learned something else from him that's important to what's happening here tonight, and the reason I'm telling you this story. And that was how he treated me. Okay? He was firm. He was very firm, but he did it in a very gentle way. He was the definition of a gentleman. He was always that way, under any circumstance. And I think that's why what Jimmy Newman felt, I think that's what a lot of people felt, and I think that's why he's being honored here tonight. Thank you. Charlie and Julia, would you come help me receive this?
Our next inductee for the Eigelhart Award is Carleen Beal Garber. A born leader, Carleen Beal Garber has worked tirelessly to pave the way for a bright future for polo. From 1997 to 2011, she chaired 11 of 14 annual charity events on behalf of the Polo Training Foundation. What began as a small gathering quickly became an international affair. It was a catalyst for major donations to the PTF and for polo. On the playing field, she made history in 1999 with her all-women's team. Carleen and her teammates Carolyn Anier, Susan Stovall, and Christy Waters defeated the entire field of 13 mixed teams in El Dorado Polo Club's January Logo League. That season, they also won the February Logo League and the Junior Officers Cup. Carleen has proudly served on the PTF board as a governor-at-large of the USPA and as an ambassador of the Federation of International Polo and the owner of El Dorado Polo Club. We'd like to honor Carleen tonight for all of her contributions. Carleen Garber.
Thank you very much.
Okay, can't go any farther back than that.
That's perfect. Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this magnificent celebration. I'd like to express my gratitude to the nominating committee and the board of directors of the Museum of Polo and the Hall of Fame. This is an unexpected recognition. I'm humbled beyond words. I also want to thank my beloved husband. He's my greatest champion. An article in Sidelines Polo magazine said it all. The best polo husband ever. You like that? Good. My father, Carlton Beal, deserves a huge thank you as well. August 1992, he chose me to replace my injured brother, Carty, in a Beal-only exhibition checker. Then Dad proceeded to mentor me in polo. 2 El Dorado seasons later, after hard-fought finals, he proudly shouted at me, "Carleen, now you're a polo player." 2 seasons and finally I'm a polo player. A loving thank you to my mom, Carleen Beal. She always believed in me. She encouraged me to take on more responsibilities in polo. She also spearheaded our Polo Training Foundation fundraising efforts by successfully challenging people to step up, offering to match their financial gifts. What a lady. The phone call. Shortly after my dad passed away in 1994, I received a phone call from the chairman of the Polo Training Foundation, Dan Calhoun. He said the PTF needed a representative from the Beal family. He invited me to be on the board. I begged off. I have 4 fabulous brothers. Fabulous. They've had lifetimes in polo. I'm new to polo. Dan was persistent. I agreed to attend a board meeting. Dan's first words at the meeting were, "Carleen, we're all here because of your father." There was talk about the need for fundraising, and Danny Sharaga would be now serve as executive director. The PTF needed help. I was hooked. Danny and I had our work cut out for us. We became the best partnership, and great friends. Shortly thereafter, Dick and I joined forces with the fabulous Fred and Leanne Mannix. We invited everyone as our guests for an evening of cocktails, bountiful hors d'oeuvres, and an auction benefiting the PTF and all of Polo. It worked out really well. People could buy terrific auction items, then designate exactly where they wanted their money to go to benefit Polo. Success came our way. What started as a small gathering grew into a national and international affair. But let's not forget the people who deserve the most credit and gratitude: the volunteers and staff of El Dorado Polo Club. I was chairman, yes, but for 14 years they also worked tirelessly, soliciting auction items and running the silent and live auctions. On top of all that, they dramatically improved our umpire program and our children's program. My friends made a huge difference. I want to say thank you, Susan Stovall. Thank you, Janet Ludwig. Thank you, Alex Jacoy. Now for the fun. Polo. Okay. When I began polo, maybe you all would relate to this. My middle name was Leave It. Oh, some of you know what Leave It is and how to have to be called Leave It all the time. Anyway, El Dorado Polo Club, January 1999. A 4-goal league, 13 mixed teams, except for one. Our BTA team was Susan Stovall, Carolyn Onier, Christy Waters, and me. Susan was a well-seasoned, solid polo player. Carolyn, rated 4 goals, was the highest-rated woman polo player in the world. Christy was relatively new to polo, but a very handy player, and I enjoyed playing defense. This was different, though. Again, the other 12 teams in the 4-goal league were mostly men. No way were they going to be embarrassed by 4 women beating them. Our team was determined to give it our best. We needed to be prepared. Every Monday morning, videos of our games and our future opponents' games were delivered to Susan and Carolyn to review. Our team meetings were all business. Carolyn developed into a great captain. Instead of trying to do it all herself, she used all of our talents also. We were a tight-knit group. Every play was about making it happen and backing each other up. Christy described us well as the feistiest, fieriest team. It was so much fun. We won every match. We won it all. We made history. We were a 4-star team. Each of us was a star. In closing, I'd like to thank my dear friends and family who have traveled from near and far to be here this evening. My children, my grandchildren, my brothers, sisters-in-law, nieces and nephews, treasured friends. Yes, you are here tonight to support me on this momentous occasion, but in truth, you've been with me every step of the way, lifting me up, cheering me on, and loving me unconditionally. For this, I'm grateful beyond words and blessed beyond measure. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Right there.
And now to the Hall of Fame inductees. The Hall of Fame is open to any person who has contributed to the game in an extraordinary and honorable manner, whether by dedication to the sport or by ability and record as a player. Chosen as a posthumous Hall of Fame inductee is Gerald Balding. A dashing figure of the golden age of polo in the 1930s, Gerald Balding made a name for himself both in the United States and abroad. After the First World War, and just in his 20s, the English-born Balding was invited by Robert Strawbridge, the president of the United States Polo Association, to come to America to train our boys how to play the game. He made the trip and began his notable career as a manager and instructor at the Rumson Polo Club. He went on to become an internationally known star. A 10-goaler in England, he was captain of the British national team. A 9-goal player in America, he won the junior championship in 1928, the U.S. Open in 1935 and 36 as part of the famed Green Tree and Monty Waterbury Cup, Green Tree team, and then he won the Monty Waterbury Cup in 1930 and 1935. Balding represented America, winning the 1930 Hurlingham Champion Cup with the Hurricanes team and rode with the American squad against Argentina in the Cup of the Americas in 1936. Here to accept the award for Gerald Balding is his daughter, Gail Balding King.
Oh, all right. Good evening, everyone. It's pretty hard to follow up after a horse called Mr. Polo, because after all, it's all about the horses. But I'm here to represent the Balding family, and I just want to start out by saying I've lived in America, although my family teased me like hell. I've lived in America for going on 50 years, and I know I don't sound it, but I just want to say I have been lucky enough to live in Aiken, South Carolina for 40 of those years, and, you know, what else can I say? It's a hotbed of polo in Aiken, and it's the most beautiful town. Please stay away. But anyway, we've been discovered, and we're not loving it. But I'd just like to say I'm here as a representative of the Balding family, and we're delighted to be here this evening to receive this award on behalf of our father, Gerald Balding. I'm going to try awfully hard not to cry. I just want to say I run a few fundraisers in Aiken, so I want to thank you people, because I know how hard it is, and you've done a great job here tonight. Thank you very much. Anyway, our father would be honored that his contribution to polo in this country has been recognized in this way. Our father came to the States from England as a young man, followed a few years later by two of his brothers, Barney and Ivor, and along with them, played polo here throughout the 1920s and the 30s. These games were mostly played at the famous Meadowbrook Club on Long Island, where matches attracted huge crowds of over 30,000 spectators. During this time, his American handicap was raised to 9 goals, and his brothers played off 7 goals. Gerald played polo all over the world, including several trips to India, but his best polo was probably seen here in the States during the golden age of polo. He played for Green Tree, one of the most successful teams of that era. His patron and longtime friend, Jock Whitney, put together an outstanding team with Pete Bostwick, the great Tom Hitchcock, and Gerald. You could say that they were the dream team of their time and were renowned for being well-mounted, with Gerald bringing many English thoroughbreds to the States to add to Jock's top-class string of ponies. They won all the major tournaments, including the US Open in 1935 and 36, the Monty Waterbury Cup, and many others, and his time playing with Green Tree was certainly the highlight of his polo career. Gerald, who was easily identified by his brown helmet, was described as a brilliant striker of the ball and was considered a superb horseman. He was rated as one of the finest players ever seen. He has the distinction of being the only British polo player to achieve 10 goals, a handicap rating of 10 goals. The outbreak of World War II brought his polo in the US to an end, and he was quoted as saying, "If I'm good enough to play polo for my country, I'm good enough to fight for my country," even though he was over the age of conscription. Sadly, he died far too young, aged 54, in 1957. After the war, he organized a great deal of the polo in England and orchestrated a new handicap system. He was a great supporter of young upcoming players. His tuition on the field mostly consisted of hollering, "Leave it," or "Ride your man," whether it be male or female. Again, we thank the Polo Hall of Fame for this great honor. Thank you very much.
And now, our Living Hall of Fame inductee for 2019 is Daniel Gonzalez. Selected as the Living Hall of Fame award winner, Daniel Gonzalez was a part of the American polo scene for over 35 years, known both as a player and a coach. A 9-goal player in the U.S. and rated 10 in Argentina, he won every high-goal tournament played on the Pacific Coast, including the Pacific Coast Open and the Butler Handicap. His international record is astounding, having won major tournaments in England and France, and the most important Argentine tournaments, including 7 wins of the Argentine Open between 1961 and 1973. His most compelling attribute is his commitment to pass on his knowledge of polo to others. Bringing players and teams to California to play for 39 consecutive years, Daniel has coached with passion and dedication. The gift of his knowledge and expertise has proved to be an influence on a countless number of young aspiring polo players. Help me welcome Daniel Gonzalez to the Hall of Fame.
Close to the microphone helps, okay? Stay close to it.
Is it there? Good evening, everybody. The other day, a friend of mine gave me a very good advice. He said to me, "Gonzalez, short speeches make people love you." And I agree. Thank you, Joe. First of all, I'm very grateful of all the people that have been part of my induction in such a special and distinguished space. It is a great honor for me to be considered among the biggest legends alive, international polo, and all the people that has made a lot contribution for making American polo what is today. I will thank to my wife Marisi, who have been all the time close to me, celebrating the days of glory and supporting me when the luck wasn't so kind. A special thanks for my dearest friend Gloria and Glenn Holden and their family, and the wonderful family. Through them, I learned to love America. All my love to them. I live all my life through this special sport. In my opinion, the best, complete, and interested game, full of power, talent, and adrenaline. Polo helped me a lot, not only economically at the beginning, but gave me the biggest fortune you can have in your life. A lot of friends all around the world, all over the world, and I still cherish them. As Churchill said, polo handicap is your passport to the world. Very wise. My polo family started with my father, Daniel. He was a horse lover and a farm player. He was raised I was raised in his farm in Córdoba, and I started playing in the horrible fields that make it impossible to hit properly the ball. I remember we didn't have a machine to mow the grass, but we had a lot of sheep, and they make the operation. They eat the grass so short, and we play polo of the estancias, the best. No responsibility, with all my family group. My son, Martin, Mariano, and my son-in-law, Paco de Narvaez, Rocio's husband, all of them turned high handicap players, and Rocio played very well too. My grandchildren, Cruz, Peque, Paquito, and Iñaki, very enthusiastic player, they love polo too. For me, the highest passion wasn't polo itself, but horses. What an enormous satisfaction is to be able to ride a good horse. After 50 years of activity, I have had the chance to ride the best of the best, which gave me the opportunity to compare and give opinions with authority. I will always keep in my heart, having won with my friends, my polo mates, you never win alone. 7 times the Argentine Open in Palermo, and many others tournaments like Gold Cup in England, Queen's Cup in Deauville, Gold Cup in Deauville, King's Cup in Spain, Pacific Coast Open in America, etc. Also as a coach, 4 times the Argentine Open in Palermo with Chapalefutu, and 2 times the FIP World Championship. As a resume, I must say that I'm very happy to be here participating of that awesome event, having again the opportunity of seeing all my new friends and old friends and drink some wine with them that I like so much. Salud and cheers, everybody.
I'd like to thank all of our sponsors and everyone here who supports the museum. As I've indicated many times before, this museum exists totally because we get support from people like yourselves coming to our events, contributing to the museum, and helping to keep this the vibrant capability and facility that it is. I'd like to thank all of the sponsors who gave us things to do tonight and were able to support the museum with their gifts and other things. And I'd like you to enjoy the rest of the evening. Our band, King Tide, will keep on playing, and we hope to see you all again next year at this event. Thank you all very much.